Hello, so can you do a 1,000-mile plus road trip in a shorter range electric car like my IONIQ Electric without planning it, without planning which charger you're going to visit and all these kind of things? Let's talk about that and try it in this video. Okay, so I had to make a fairly long kind of road trip. My feeling of a road trip is something that's fun. This was kind of fun, but yeah, had other purposes to it. Going around a lot of England, a sort of big loop around the centre of England, totalling over 1,000 miles. And yeah, I thought I'd try it this time because there are more charger networks than I used to use. And I signed up for BP Chargemaster Polar network this time, which I've never done before, but I figured the places I was going, it was better covered. So I figured, well, there's the questionable quality Ecotricity electric highway ones at the motorway services. I've got access with a fob to these BP Chargemaster Polar ones. There's at little supermarkets and things, there's the Pod Point. There are Instavolt that take contactless payment and a few other options like Alpha Power and Genie Point and a few other things. I thought, okay, finally the time has come in 2019 where you can make this kind of length of road trip without planning, without making a sort of map in advance of which chargers you're going to visit. And yeah, so this video is going to kind of document how that went and whether I managed to do it. Yeah, so not to give the impression that long road trips in an electric car are all about eating a packed lunch outside a fancy chateau, but it just so happens I'm eating a packed lunch outside a fancy chateau here while charging my car. But this is not the norm by any stretch, and it's very unusual to be doing this. So this was very nice. This one I discovered on this trip. I don't know when I'll visit again, but yeah, great. Chateau Impney with BP Chargemaster Polar network. Rapid charger. Yeah, highly recommended. Very, very pleasant surroundings with the right weather, of course. So I deliberately wanted to start off here with the kind of contradiction of this kind of beautiful surroundings of this particular rapid charger. The drawback is, of course, this is not one of the ones that's at the motorway or highway services or rest stops. This is a BP Chargemaster Polar unit, and because one of the charging networks, Ecotricity with the electric highway, has a kind of exclusivity agreement on most of the motorway services in the UK, you've got to drive off the motorway and then get a detour back. So this was about 2 miles or 3 kilometres here, and about sort of 15-20 minutes lost by having to do that. So most of the time, the experience of being at the charges is nothing like we've just seen at the chateau. It's more like the kind of quiet setting with sometimes motorway noise, sometimes not. Then interspersed with a bit of driving, sometimes through sort of scenic stuff here like in Wales, and then stopping again and sort of staying in the car or waiting by the car. A bit more kind of scenic motorway driving, shenanigans of truck drivers that don't seem to understand how overtaking works and just hog the kind of outside lane for as long as they can. And then you're back to kind of more stops, plugging in the car. In the case of Ecotricity, it's fiddling with apps, hoping that they work, sitting in the car maybe, going into the services, going to the toilet, having a coffee or something, depending on the mood you're in. And then, more time back on the road. In the case of the IONIQ Electric, coasting a lot of the time, even at motorway highway speeds of 70 miles an hour, sort of above 100 kilometers an hour, and getting kind of 5.8, 5.9 miles per kilowatt hour efficiency, fiddling them with RFID card fobs. And I'm going to kind of let this one play out almost in real time here. So, this is the kind of time it takes to start a charger working, even when it's a fairly modern one like this BP Polar Chargemaster one. And look, it's just going through these things, and the Ecotricity units do this as well, and other ones do. And I'm sure this kind of handshake happens with Teslas as well, because I've seen that when the lights are flashing blue on the charge port on a Tesla. But gosh, this is real time now. This actually takes a long time. Here I was topping up, by the way, because I was using this for kind of local runs in between part of this road trip. Then, you're back on the road, in this case a kind of scenic village down in Wales, near my kind of childhood places where I sort of grew up. Lovely roads, nice to be back there, and all the trees have grown a lot in the sort of intervening 20 years since I lived there. Then if you're kind of doing other things, as I was doing on this road trip, you might be parked in and plugged at a slower charger, kind of 3 kilowatt or 6 kilowatt charging post like this. This one is in Cambridge, I think. This one I think was free with the RFID card and the subscription fee of Polar, of Chargemaster Polar. But of course then with these posts you come across a few that are dead. I ideally would have liked to have charged here. I couldn't because the unit was just completely dead. No indication at all. You couldn't even start it. It was clearly switched off. So that one I couldn't use. But as you're hanging out at these, this is actually where I used to work. And, you see all these unusual electric cars that staff members have got that I didn't realise sort of plugged in at the back. Other trips around, I saw more IONIQs. This is the hybrid, but I saw more IONIQ Electrics the last few weeks than I've seen in the whole kind of year and a half of owning mine in the UK. I've barely ever seen them, but for some reason now I'm about to sell my IONIQ. I saw more of them. Then, back on the road, and the IONIQ is very competent, very smooth, really kind of relaxing to drive, very simple to drive, very confident overtaking there. Then back at other kind of charging sites. We're back in Milton Keynes here at the charging hub, where, as I said in my previous video, these IONITY 350 kilowatt chargers are going in. They're not commissioned yet, but they're in the process of going in. More fiddling around and faffing around with screens and things, but it's fine. It works, but it's slow. And, this is a lot of information to give someone, really, if they're not used to electric cars. You imagine at a petrol pump, you don't get this kind of readout. Yeah, again, I was often charging at high states of charge as well on this trip, because I was just kind of topping up to make sure I could get to the places I was going and back again. That's the thing, when you're away from charging at home, you kind of have to, I like to play it on the safe side. Again, this is this IONITY site. This was before those units had gone in. I'm jumping back and forth chronologically here on this trip, just showing different things here and there. This was actually when I arrived in Milton Keynes the first time, which I put out on Twitter. And, my typical luck, I get there and all the units have been switched off, related to putting in the 4 new high-power chargers, the IONITY ones. Like, all of these were off. So again, this was without planning. So I turned up thinking, oh, there's 8 units there, so even if one goes wrong, there's lots and lots of others to back up. And I got there just literally the sort of day or so that they switched it off, and they were going to be luckily switched back on the next day. But, you imagine, you're planning. I knew that this was there. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't checked live status and so on, because I was deliberately not doing that to see if this kind of trip was possible now in the UK. And then I come and all 8 are down. I mean, perhaps it was advertised, I don't know. But luckily, there was still an older unit, the sort of French DBT unit, by the same network nearby. So there are actually 9 units there, and there'll be 13 once the 4 IONITY units are in. So I was able to charge on this one. And again, I was charging, it's still charging fairly fast here, even though it's at a fairly high state of charge, the IONIQ. So that was good to see. But, luckily that unit was there. Luckily it worked with the same RFID card, and I wasn't kind of stranded then, because I had to go in and out of Bedford and Milton Keynes and over to Cambridge and other things from this location. So just dotting around locally, but, finishing off this big circuit that I was doing around England and Wales. Just to note a minute, this is a metal pillar here holding up these canopies. So it is nice that there's, the rain cover for charging. That's very rare to see in the UK, and it's nice. I think everything is moving forward. If there were lots of these hubs around the country, you could really be quite strategic in getting around without any kind of planning and without any kind of worry. It is nice to have the rain cover. I found that they were messing with my mobile phone signal when I was stood underneath it trying to talk to a Hyundai dealer that I was hoping would buy my car. So that was a bit of a nuisance, but just a side thing. This hub is at the Milton Keynes Coachway Park and Ride. So there is actually a cafe in there, and there's shelter, and you could get buses places. And there's a toilets, but you have to pay for the toilet. So yeah, now we're back down in Wales, and here I'm just the car has got 162 miles indicated range, or about 260 kilometers. So normally the nominal's about 130 or 210 kilometers. So yeah, and I was charging there to 94%, where it cut off just now on the rapid charger. And again, at these posts, I was just looking at the voltage levels. This is back in Milton Keynes now. And, just kind of checking out these new units. This is something that's really changed in the time I've had my IONIQ. So I do have a video early in the channel about, is CCS, the CCS plug and connector that the IONIQ has, which you can see represented as this CCS plug here. Is that a problem, charging the car on long trips in the UK? And it was at the time, actually, with just the Ecotricity units and a few other networks coming into being. Now, this kind of hub and lots of other sort of Polar and other networks around, Alpha Power, Instavolt, PodPoint, GeniePoint, it's not, and IONITY that are only going to have CCS. So, actually, it was a fairly good gamble, although, the car will be going, but, it's good. It's much, much better than it has been, and that's happened during the 18 months or so I've been driving the IONIQ since January 2018. So that's really quite a big change, I think, in the UK. One thing that hasn't changed about the UK is all the variable speed limits and the atrocious traffic and the very, very bad slow traffic through the centre of the sort of Birmingham area, which is in the Midlands of the UK, and the main sort of south-north spine on the west of England. I did encounter a few charger errors. There were a few on the Polar units that I thought would be okay, but didn't. I also had the issue of the cables were too short, so I had to fiddle around with my parking because I couldn't reach from the side of the unit to the side of the car if I was parked in the bay correctly. But yeah, traffic in the UK is a nightmare. So you'll notice later in the video I show the 5.8 miles per kilowatt hour efficiency, but that's with a very low average speed because you just can't seem to go fast around the kind of centre of England on motorways even. So, you heard me jump to my parents' house where, of course, it's kind of a bit like Bjorn Neeland says on his YouTube channel, ABC, always be charging. Here I had to use the granny cable, the trickle charger, that's only about sort of 10 amps, 220 volts, so about 2 kilowatt, charging the car very, very slow. So this was just, safely through the garage to an outside outlet that's covered. It's not under the rain like that recent article that was saying about, electric car owners risking charging in the rain and using extension cables and things. This is not, that's going straight into the car. But look at this, 41% state of charge and an estimated 9 hours and 30 minutes to reach 100%. And I had no other charging option here. This is at my parents', and they don't have a kind of electric vehicle supply equipment. And then this is kind of actually, the 1,000-mile road trip. I saw an old friend. I went to the cinema and things, did some things, fun things before leaving the UK for Denmark. My main memory of the trip isn't any problems with the chargers, actually. It's just terrible traffic on the motorways and lots of congestion and a low average speed. Very difficult to get about the UK quickly these days. That's the main issue with the road trip. Not the electric car and not the chargers. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It shows, it's a bit sad because this IONIQ is going. It's going to be sold very soon. To know that, yeah, it's perfectly possible. The efficiency throughout was amazing, nearly 6 miles per kilowatt hour. That's roughly double what I used to get doing lots of motorway speeds in my old Nissan Leaf 24 kilowatt hour. So that's really good. And yeah, you can do it now in the UK. You might have to switch from one charger network to another. They don't have all the same kind of friendliness of contactless payment and so on. I hate the idea of RFID fobs and apps and subscriptions and so on that you have to sign up in advance and someone posts you something out. That's just, imagine doing that in a petrol car. You couldn't go somewhere until you'd received something through the post to access petrol pumps. Nonsense. I can see why they do it in terms of covering the capital cost and so on, but that's just not, wide-scale adoption kind of system. And yeah, even though the actual infrastructure seems to be pretty good, I did get some errors with the BP Chargemaster Polar units down in Milton Keynes and elsewhere, some errors I didn't recognise. A few didn't start. Luckily, there were a lot nearby at that hub at Milton Keynes. Yeah, so overall, a really great experience. Yes, you can do a sort of road trip quite easily of this without any anxiety in a car that's as efficient and as consistent as an IONIQ Electric. I'm going to miss it. It's been a nice way to kind of say goodbye to it, actually, this kind of final road trip, going to some of, childhood places, other kind of fun places. And yeah, so thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. There's going to be more coming about this car, a review of it, and yeah, then my kind of experiences trying to find a kind of replacement for it or some other way of getting around in Denmark in a kind of zero tailpipe way. Okay, yeah, so thanks for watching and bye for now.